Hey, what's up Wolfpack? I'm the Wiggling Wolf and welcome to another Overwatch video. This video is on the basics of how to read maps in Overwatch. This is one of those things that can really separate the average player from one of the best players in the world, really, because it's one of those things you need to learn in order to predict where people are going to attack you from, where the enemy is going to push from, where your team should push to, when you should flank, all these kinds of different things that you can utilize in order to kind of throw your enemy off and win the match. Because the entire basis of Overwatch in terms of winning that I've kind of noticed after playing the game for a little while is you win, or the easiest way to win is to catch your enemy off guard, which I find is really cool. It's pretty interesting because there are all sorts of little flanking routes around these maps, and I'm playing on Route 66, but this guide is kind of the basics of this, and it affects basically all types of maps in terms of the payload type maps, not the capture zone type maps, which I will go into in the next part. This is like part 1 of 2. But the first time I'm going over the payload type maps just because I enjoy these more personally. Just because you have a clear offense and defense kind of thing. I don't know. I just enjoy this game mode more. So when you're reading the maps, you notice that there's generally in Overwatch 1 or 2 main lanes. Right in the start here, there's one. But you have all these like little branching paths off to the side. Coming to the middle-ish area of the map by the gas station, you still have the main lane that circles around, but then you kind of have this secondary pseudo second main lane that circles around here. You could also kind of call that a branching path. But most of these, payload type maps have a main lane, and they have all sorts of little nooks and crannies on the sides that you can really use to flank. And that's kind of what they should best be used for. So when you are flanking, you should not obviously send your healers to the flank. Your healers should be focused on your tanks and should be focused on the main objective, which is the payload. Unless you have 2 healers, then feel free to send one over, especially if it's something like a Mercy and a Lucio. Lucio is a great flanking healer. So when I'm pushing the payload, it's pretty clear who is on it and who is not, especially in Overwatch where the characters are so diverse. But that also means that you have a lot of bodies on this payload. So let's say I have 3 people on this payload, and then the enemy's pushing us back. There's no way we're going to be able to get through. I wouldn't send more than 2 people around the side to flank, or through the little tunnel over there to flank, because what you're basically wanting to do is to feign your numbers, or to fake your numbers here. You need to have the majority on the front, which is where all the focus is, and then put the minority going through on the flank. So maybe 2 people. If you are the flank and you get noticed by the enemy team and they start to push on you, you are now the front. And if you're stuck here alone, unless you're something like Tracer or Reaper or Genji, one of the more mobile characters in the game, you're probably gonna die, especially if you're a defensive character like Mei, who's actually really good for flanking. You're probably going to die just because your mobility is slow. So you really need to have help on your flanks, or at least have someone in some sort of transitionary state where they're firing on the front, and then if the person on the flank gets in trouble, they can immediately push over and help them out, and so that their teammate can push back. Things like this win matches. You need to be communicating constantly. You need to be kind of calling out who is flanking and when they're pushing in, like when they're starting their flank. And at the same time, it is okay to reset your flank. What I mean by resetting my flank is, let's say I'm pushing around here, and a couple enemies notice me, so immediately I'm going to push back, because the key to flanking is to go unnoticed. So I come back to the front, and then as they kind of get more focused on my team, I push back out to the left. And this basically makes my flank cleaner, and that is what resetting your flank is. Starting your flank, realizing it's not safe, pushing back away from your flank, and then pushing in again to flank the enemy when they don't expect it as much. And that being said, some of the best flankers in the game are also defensive characters. Offensive characters are obviously best for flanking, especially things like Reaper, who are really good at getting behind the enemy and good at pushing back out. Same with Genji, who can climb walls, and Tracer, who can just blink away and rewind. But some of the best flankers of the game, even on offense, are your defensive characters. Hanzo is a great offensive flanker and defensive. The defensive characters are kind of good on both. The offensive characters, though, are obviously best at it, but the defensive characters are pretty decent at it, too. Mei is a great flanker because she can actually guard her escape with her walls. Whereas Junkrat is actually a better defensive flanker. So if you're on defense and you're trying to keep the enemy kind of holed up in an area, he can really do good work by crowd controlling with his grenades and keeping them locked in a space. So that's kind of what I want to talk about, is just flanking and kind of knowing when to flank. So if you see clear focus on your team and you're really having a hard time pushing through a zone, that's a good time to flank. And it's a good time to say, hey, let's flank, let's send two, and literally call out who's going to do it. If you have some sort of team captain or someone who is calling your plays, I would advise to pick one or two people to do that. Send a tank, send a defensive character, and an offensive character around the sides, flank them, get their focus on them so they become the front, and then your old front can now become the flank, and you can essentially out-pinch them together and push the payload forward. That is probably one of the most effective ways to push the payload in Overwatch if you are really just holed up in an area and you don't know how to push out of it. If you're on defense, then your whole goal is to keep them in an area, so you really want to just be holding your ground essentially and not dying, because your deaths are basically what lead to their pushes, obviously. So if you want to like throw a Junkrat down here, or even a Hanzo or something, and just launch grenades or arrows or whatever over and just kind of keep them holed up. And once you see someone like maybe trying to flank, if you're on defense, do something to push them back with an ice wall, grenades, any sort of attack. Doing damage will automatically make a player want to back off because they feel endangered. It's instinctual, and it just kind of makes sense. And if they don't, they're going to die. Because on defense, you have the advantage because you get to be ready for them to come if you can predict their lanes. So how do you predict a flank? This is probably one of the hardest skills to learn, and it honestly just comes with feeling out the map and feeling out the way the game is flowing at the current time. And you kind of really have to pay attention to their numbers, which is hard, especially in a crowd area like this where you have all this like wreckage and things to cover them. So you don't know if someone's hiding behind these like tube things over there. They could be, but you only see 3 people out there. But he could actually be flanking you. And if you're really holding up the enemy in an area, that's probably a good time to at least go and check, especially if you're a faster character or a more mobile character, or one of the more defensive characters. Your defense and offensive characters are really there, at least on defense, to watch your 6, essentially. They're there to watch your flank. Your tanks are going to be holding your ground along with your healers, and your healers are going to just be managing everybody, essentially. So that's kind of it. Basically, that's the super basics of it. There's obviously a lot more to it, but this is just kind of an overview kind of thing. I could talk about this forever. Honestly, there's so much different stuff. But I really wanted to talk about flanking and how to watch your flanks and how to flank and when you know to flank. Pushing the payload is a really good flanking type of game mode. The more, I guess, defensive-based zone control kind of game mode has less opportunity, or has equal opportunity to flank, but you have to kind of do it in a different way, and you have to structure your flanks in a different way, and even sometimes without using your offensive characters, depending on the map. So the zone control ones are a little bit more kind of weird, I guess, in terms of when you want to activate your flanks and things like that. Oh, grenade. But yeah, I hope this video helped you guys out. Again, it was just the basics. This is not going super in depth. For those of you who are a bit more skilled at the game, you probably know there's a lot more to this. If you guys want me to go a little more into it, I will after I do the zone control episode as part 2 to this one. But yeah, manage your flanks. They will win you matches, and they will also lose you matches if you do not know how to defend them properly. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Again, as I said like 5 times, there's a lot more to this topic, and there are a lot of very specific scenarios to this topic. This is just kind of a general overview. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Like the video if it helped you out, and subscribe for more Overwatch tips and just general gameplay videos. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. If you have nano boost on you, it's crazy. This next part is kind of an overview of like how to play her. For me, Anna took about 2 or 3 matches to get the hang of. My first advice is don't play her as a traditional sniper, at least in terms of DPS and damaging the enemy. She's a healer for a reason, so you need to focus on your teammates first in terms of healing, then focus on the enemy second. Her ult is fantastic.